Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Prison Bosses. It's with great pride that I bring you and welcome you to today's guest. This gentleman, as I mentioned before we started recording, I know today's episode is going to be fire because we've had to reschedule it twice already, and we led with some little communication issues with sounding, and so it just tells me that we're gearing up for something special today. And so, with that being said, I'd like to introduce you guys to the executive director of the Inside Circle. You might have seen him as he was featured on The Work documentary while he was incarcerated. And it's with great joy and insights that I introduce you guys to Mr. Eldra Jackson III. Eldra, how you feeling today?
I'm feeling good today, Trent. Thank you for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure to participate in this and, be able to communicate to the individuals on the inside because I know how it can feel to feel cut off from the world and feel like you've been forgotten. So anytime I get the opportunity to, vibe and let those cats know that we got them in mind and pushing for them, I'm always excited about that.
Man, we appreciate that, brother. And so, Eldra, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you were born, raised at.
So, where was I born? So I was a military brat. I was actually born on a military base in Wiesbaden, Germany. So I was raised, on a few bases around the world between Germany and the U.S. back and forth until I was 10 years old. We came back to the United States for good and settled, in home bases, California. Initially we were in Monterey, and then when my dad got ready to retire, we moved, to home base, which is Sacramento, California. So that's home base for me.
So you from the Bay, huh? Bay Area. I love it. Bay Area.
Close by, just 90 miles east of the Bay Area, the Northern
Gotcha.
California vibe.
What was it like growing up as a young black young man in Germany?
Well, it wasn't a huge cultural thing like folks might think, because being on the military base, you're around other Americans. So, there were other black people, there were other Chicanos, there were other whites. It was just like being, in the US, you were just on a base. So you're like on American soil. The difference would be when you leave the base, like for field trips and to do things like that. Then you're out in the culture, you're out in Germany. And from what I remember, again, I'm telling you best I can remember as somebody 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, is it was the people were, again, as a child can remember, were welcoming. They were always nice. And I guess people are always nice to children. So that's really what I remember. And, the beautiful scenery. Yeah.
So question for you, Eldra. So now you grow up, you're on the military base. You're here in America now, about 10 years old, I think you said. What started to shift for you, or what happened that led to your actual incarceration?
Okay. So that then takes us to Sacramento. Now we're talking about the early 80s. We're talking about the crack cocaine explosion. We're talking about, the proliferation of gangs being exported from Southern California and living in, the inner city of Sacramento. And, people, hear, okay, well, this cat had a 2-parent household. His dad was in the military, he had everything he needed, so what the hell you doing messing with gangs and selling crack and things like that? Well, that goes, that would take us back to Germany. What I have found in my time of incarceration and now going back inside is most cats in jail, just like most human beings, but it's highly concentrated in jail, is individuals have trauma, undealt trauma that hasn't been addressed, hasn't been identified, and definitely hasn't been addressed. And so, when I was 7 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old in Germany, being left by my parents with babysitters, I suffered a child molestation at the hand of babysitters. And so that was not something that I spoke to my parents about. That was not something that I spoke to my caregivers about. And so that
Yep.
little, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old boy was developing tools to adapt and to combat
Yep.
defense mechanisms to deal with that
Yep.
trauma. And
Yep.
so, when you ask what led to incarceration, this is not an excuse for my incarceration. This just gives you the backdrop of how my mind was shaping, how my mind was forming, and then that dictated how I thought and how I was able to
Yes.
rationalize certain things and be okay with certain things. So
So true.
engaged in athletics, as a youngster. I played baseball, I played football, and those were places where people see the prowess on the field, and I could hide behind that. That was my identity. That was what I could allow people to see. They could see, what was happening on the field. That was who I was. And I didn't know who I was. I didn't have an understanding of.
I think where we left off, you had made mention of growing up, some things that took place in forms of like a uh youth sexual situation that affected you, and how the thought process is kind of the last portion that I ended up hearing, how the thought process from dealing with that tragic experience also then started to manipulate things as you were growing up in California in the 80s during the crack era and the gang era. If I'm wrong, please let me know. But if not, the floor is back to yours.
No, you right on point, bro. You right on point. So yeah, man. So, those experiences, as a child kind of shaped my mind and my thinking
Mm-hmm.
process. So, I chose a thinking process. That's how I choose to look at it, today, to take full ownership, over my being.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so sports was a big thing. I was able to hide,
Mm.
on the field, and people would see, the athlete. They would see the events on the field, and that was my identity.
Yep.
And it got to a point where I was like 13 years old, and me and one of my buddies snuck his mom's car out. We cats used to do that once upon a time.
Yep.
You know,
Yep. Yep.
used to call it joy riding, but I look back on it now. We stole his mama's shit and wrecked it. And she had a
Mm.
for sale sign, window in it. I remember it was a 76 Impala. It had a for sale sign in the window. She was a single mother. She was trying to get rid of it. And we tore that woman's car up. So, my
Yep.
parents agreed to pay for half of it. And so that summer, I was just, my discipline was, I was relegated to chores around the house. Wasn't no baseball. I wasn't playing
Mm-hmm.
no sports. Wasn't none of that,
Mm-hmm.
because I was
Yep.
working off that debt with my folks. And, I had, in playing sports and in going to, school now in the inner city, I knew all of the gangsters. I knew all of the cats. We played sports together. We went to school together. And, that was at that time in my brain, I was receiving a measure of respect for what I could do on the field. And
Mm.
in
Mm.
that era, again, in a child's mind, the folks respect was a big thing. I didn't really
Yep.
understand the concept of what respect really is, but my child's mind saw respect as how other people viewed me, how other people saw me. And that
Mm.
direct correlation was through athletics. The other cats
Mm.
that I could identify that had respect was the cats in the street, the gangsters.
That's
So
right.
when I
Yep.
couldn't
Yep.
play sports, the transition for me that made sense was, okay, I'm gonna start fucking with the gangsters
That's a fact.
because they got
Yep.
respect,
Yep.
and there's another way that I can hide. I can
And you
create a
know what?
persona.
Yes, indeed. And I was just gonna say what's so ironic, and I think it's a shared experience for many of our listeners too. A lot of us grew up playing sports. A lot of us identify with that. For me, I was a basketball head.
Mhm.
Only 5'8", so the NBA wasn't in my calling. But I identified as a basketball player. I surrounded myself with basketball players. And to your point, outside of the athletics, when I did start to, get off the porch, as they say, if it wasn't athletics, then I'm doing what the gangsters are doing. I'm doing what the drug
Yeah.
dealers are doing, because
Yeah.
they're the ones that are winning. They're the ones that I see with the pretty girls. The pretty girls
Yep.
love them. The guys respect them. And so,
Yep.
they respect me now for being an athlete. But after high school, since I didn't go nowhere, that ship sailed. And so I could definitely relate to that. And I'm sure there's a lot of listeners who have like that kind of same shared experience. Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so now, question for you. So that was at what, 11? You guys 11, 12. You guys still in the car
That
joyriding.
I was about 12, 13 years old. Yep.
12, 13. So, but you didn't get locked up or anything for that, right?
I didn't get locked up for that, but I was on the path. That was what's, I got popped for that, and that was just our parents, but I was already doing stuff that I wasn't getting caught for. So it just started getting concentrated. The thing started getting concentrated. First time I went to juvenile hall, I was 13, actually,
Mm,
because
mm.
I mean, things were happening quick, things was, I mean, it was a
It,
long, hot summer.
it spirals. It spirals. Things just take off and it spirals, and it happens real quick. So by
Yeah.
13, you're in juvie. How long are you in juvie for?
So the first time I went, I was in there for 30 days. Wound up going to
Gotcha.
court. The judge kicked me out. He gave me a work project and probation that
Mm-hmm.
lasted maybe 60 days. I was back in the community. And then I
Mm.
went back to juvenile hall and they sent me to the boys ranch. And that was a 5-month stint. I got out the following summer and I was out for maybe 5 months, caught a
Mm.
case and wound up going to the youth authority. That was a
Yep.
3-year
Yep.
sentence. I did like
Mm.
2 years off of that sentence. I got out. I was back in the community for a few months. Uh, 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 Now I'm 18,
Yep.
and so I'm in the county jail. I get arrested for illegal weapons, a stolen vehicle, receiving stolen property. I go to the county jail, but I'm still on youth authority parole. I wind
Yep.
up pleading guilty to possession of stolen property. I get time served in the county jail. They give me a violation, send me back to YA. I do a bullet for that. I get
Mm.
out. Now I'm 19.
Yep. Game changer.
I get out October 10th, 1990. On November 1st, 1990, which is 21 days, I'm sitting in the county jail with all of the commitment offenses that wound up netting me a life sentence.
Wow. Can you kind of go into some of those offenses that ended up
Oh,
getting
yeah.
a
Yep.
life sentence?
So I had a first degree attempted murder. I had a slew of robberies and kidnapping for purposes of robbery. It was the kidnapping for purposes of robbery that got me the life sentence. In California, that'll get you 7 to life. So I wound up
Mm.
getting sentenced. Went to trial. It was me and 2 co-defendants. We went to trial. Got hammered for a bunch of stuff, and I got 17 years running bow-legged with 7 to life, which in California, that means you do the 17 years first. Once you knock that down, and at the time it was halftime, so I could have either done anywhere from halftime to the full 17 years, complete that
Mm-hmm.
sentence, then the 7 to life kicks in. So off of that total
Mm.
time, I wound up doing 24 years.
And that was in a row. That was a 24-year
That was
stretch that you ended
straight.
up
I
doing.
walked I walked in the county jail November 1st, 1990. I walked out of prison June 19th, 2014.
So talk about a little bit. So I'm sure now here you are, a young man. You're looking at life in prison.
hmm
What
hmm
was your mindset at the time?
Well, my mindset was this is the place I'll die, because at that time, in Cali, yeah, they have different tiers of life sentences. I had life with the possibility of parole, but life with the possibility of parole at that time was a joke. The only people who were getting out were women who were victims of like that burn in bed thing, domestic violence, or former
Yep.
police officers. If you was black,
Mm.
you was a gang member, you was anything like that, your ass is dying in prison. So my
Over.
mindset
Yep.
was, especially at that age, 19 years old, was I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna learn how to be, the best convict I could be, which had already
Mm.
begun in the streets because I was always messing with old heads.
Yep.
And
Yep.
back then, before three strikes and all of that, cats was going away for a year, 2 years, 3 years. They come back swole. They got their penitentiary stories. They teaching cats Swahili. They telling you when you
Yep.
go to the pen, not youngsters, stay away from the pen. But when you go, these are your folks. This is who you get with. This is your crowd. This is how
Yep.
you move. So I was getting the education and the training in the game before I even went to the
Mm.
pen. So it was really
Mm.
about then beginning to implement those skills and that training that had come from my elders, from my OGs, and
Yep.
figuring out a way to make a name for myself, not too big, but enough so, because again, I'm a coward, I'm scared, but I don't want nobody to know that.
Oh yeah.
Trying to
Yep.
create a space
Yep.
where cats don't fuck with me and I can
Yep.
just be
Yep.
left alone and you can't see me.
Right.
So there's
Right.
a balance there. I'm able to articulate that now, but that wasn't what my thinking was then. My thinking was, I just want to be seen as a badass. I
Mm.
can't say,
And how
oh,
did
I'm
that?
scared.
So with that said, I would assume, and this is just my assumption from hearing what you said, I would assume then when you came on early in, you were probably doing things to show that you were a badass.
For my
And then at
first
some,
decade.
oh, you,
That was my first decade in the joint. Was that? I was still heavy into my gang associations. Getting caught with knives. When I could, opportunistically, in the underground, black market inside.
mm-hmm,
Assaults, batteries,
mm-hmm.
going to the hole a few times for different things. So I was still engaged in the criminal lifestyle because there was no
Yep.
need to stop.
Agreed, especially with the mindset at the time, looking at
Yeah,
life. So it's like this is just this. It is what it is.
this
So
is
you
where I
mentioned
live.
a decade in. What happened a decade in that brought about some sort of shift in your mindset?
So about 10 years in. So this is 1999. Yeah,
Mm.
again, Juneteenth, man, is they celebrated out here for what they celebrated for, but it was the day I got out of prison, and it's the last time I went to the hole was June 19th,
Wow.
99. Me
Wow.
and one of my homeboys assaulted another cat, a rival gang member, in an
Mm-hmm.
attempt to take his life. By the grace of God, we were unsuccessful in that attempt, but we wound up,
Mm.
getting a shoe. And I'd been to the hole a few times by now. I had been caught with weapons a few times by now. And so classification marked me as standalone, walk alone. So for that, time, that 2 years I was in the hole, I was in the cell by myself. I went to the yard by myself. There was no human contact outside of the guards. And so it gave
Mm.
me a lot of time to think and do some inward looking. And I didn't get to the place where now I'm evolved and I'm Buddha sitting on the mount or something like that. But I was beginning to see that every time I wound up with my ass in a sling, it was really back in somebody else's play. I was never in trouble
Mm.
behind my own beef. I was never in trouble behind something I started. It was always me
Yep.
being loyal to the gang, being loyal to my homeboys. And so now I'm sitting in here by myself, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and behind
Mm-hmm.
something that I really didn't give a damn about, and a
Yep.
finger snap away from death row. And I'm like, okay, this ain't working. This right here ain't working for me. This gang shit, this ain't working because I'm always, quote unquote, sticking to the script, and I'm watching other cats fall to the wayside and taking deals and doing different things. Are they going home?
Yep.
And I'm still stuck in the hole. I got to do this life sentence. So I'm like, okay, when they kick me out of here, I'm done with this, not for the sake of changing my life, but my original thinking was
Mm.
there's no way I'm going to be able to get down to a lower level security prison and escape as long as the goon squad is watching me and got me associated with all this bullshit. That was my thing.
Gotcha. That's real. That's real. So the thought process shifted because I just need to get my classification down so one day I can escape this motherfucker. More
One
so
day
than
I
me
could
just
get
trying to
someplace
escape.
where I can hop a fence where the gates ain't electrified and the prison's not surrounded by gun towers. That's not
Mm,
happening in maximum security. So I got to play the
facts,
long game
facts,
and get down to
facts.
minimum security while I'm still able-bodied enough to run.
Too.
And if I got
That's
to
wild.
overtake somebody and overpower them, I'm not got bad knees and elbows and
Right,
backs. And
right, right.
so that's the
Right,
thinking.
right. I can still do it. Yeah, I'm with you. Yo, so the listeners out there, I hope you heard that, man. That was a powerful piece because this brother's change came about really still associated with some of the old thought processes, but also with the enlightenment of understanding the gang life isn't working for me because it's
Yeah.
actually putting me in worse situations. And that's
Yeah.
something that I try to talk to the brothers and sisters about. When I go into the prisons, I still go into prisons on a weekly basis. I understand the gang culture and the concept. Some of us were born into gangs. Some of our parents were gang members, so we kind of inherited it. And so
Yeah.
oftentimes for individuals, it's hard to shy away from it. However, if you listen to this brother and really listen to the experience, he did something for the gang, but he was the one that was suffering the consequence. The gang was still out there, they were still doing their thing. And so, one thing about life is we're always going to be held accountable for us and for our actions. And who we associate ourselves with oftentimes could either get us in trouble or help push us further in doing good. And so for me personally, I like to associate myself with gangs of good things, so that way the end game usually is positivity. So with that being said, now you're in here. It's 1999. You're starting to have that shift.
Hmm.
What I know you get released. I think you said in 2014, right? So we
Yeah.
got 15 more years going on. What shifted in your mind that eventually, I'm assuming it wasn't about escaping. Eventually, it
Mhm.
was more so about working on yourself so you could get out here the right way. When did that
Yeah.
all come about?
So when I got kicked out of the shoe, they sent me to New Folsom. That was a shoe kick out yard at the time. I went to C facility in New Folsom. And so again, playing the long game and playing okay, I'm rehabilitated, I'm doing my thing, I'm trying to get the goon squad off my tail,
Mm.
and looking at ways to settle my internals, to settle myself. Cause now I'm on, like, my thinking and my spirit is I'm thinking martial arts. I'm really thinking war. I'm thinking that way. So I'm thinking, how
Yep.
do I calm my nerves? How do I calm my breathing? Because if I'm in a situation, I'm in a box someplace and I gotta not breathe for 3 minutes while the man
Mm.
walks, I got this. So
Mm.
this is how I'm training myself now. So
Mm.
I'm reading different stuff. I'm studying different disciplines. I'm studying Taoism. I'm studying Buddhism. I'm meditating. I'm doing all of the things that I need to do in order to get mind, body, and spirit in alignment with this plan.
Go. Let's go.
And so a part of that is engaging in different groups to get access at different materials, to get access at, people that are coming in and had these different teachings and trainings and things like that. And I see it as beneficial. So that's when I started engaging in groups and self-help and things like that, because I'm
Mm.
looking at how can this be beneficial to me for my plan and to let the man know he's rehabilitating himself. So it's a twofold
Mm.
purpose. And
Win-win.
so
Yep.
that's where it started. And so along the way, I started to internalize the teachings, for not for nefarious reasons, but for good. I see there started to be a
That's right.
shift from,
Yep.
a Sith level thinking to more Jedi level thinking.
Mm.
And
Mm.
there was a group, it was Inside Circle, that was on that yard. And so, I was familiar. I used to say I know, but I didn't know those cats. I was familiar with a lot of the guys that were engaged in that, and their reputations, in the streets and in the joint, and what they were capable of. And I admired the way that they carried themselves as men, not as gangsters, not
Mm.
as convicts, but they were carrying themselves as men, but they were all
Yep.
a part of this group. They were all a part of this program. Now the program had, the reputation on the yard by those that were not in the know as, hug a thug, and they in there having seances and
Mm.
praying around
Mm.
candles, doing all of these old things. That was,
Yep.
the neophyte, conversation. And I was invited, to participate a couple of times, but kind of still caught up in the yard gossip about what was going on
Yep.
up in there. So it took me a
Yep.
minute to get over that myself and be like, well, wait a minute, man. I know these dudes. I'm familiar with all of these cats, and ain't none of these dudes suckers, marks, tricks, none of this,
Right.
and they going up in there on a regular basis. So I'm gonna go ahead and check it out. If it ain't for me, I ain't got to stay up in there because can't nobody make me do nothing. I'm gonna go check it out. If it fit,
Right.
it fit. It don't, it don't. So I
That's right.
eventually, accepted the invitation, went in, and been doing it ever since. That was in 2004 when I went in, and it's a lifestyle for me now. The first session in
Yep.
there, my spirit knew that I was at home.
That's powerful. And you know what else is powerful that you said that I hope the listeners caught the jewel? One, you started to think outside and do things you never did, experiencing new religions from Buddhism, incorporated meditation,
Hmm.
mindfulness, as well as associating yourself with people that you wouldn't have thought you would associated yourself with before. That's where growth happens. And I
Yeah,
think one thing about this platform is really teaching individuals the importance of stepping outside their comfort zones, because I feel like I personally believe that really when we step out of our comfort zones, that's where we grow at. When we're in our comfort zones, it's too easy. Things just come as they always had. And for us in life, as we want to evolve and grow, you're gonna have to take yourself out them comfort zones. You're gonna have
yeah,
to surround yourself with different people, and you're gonna have a mindset shift. All of the things that we see through your story that you experience. Um,
yeah.
but now this is your introduction to the inside circle.
Mhm.
Today you're an executive director there. So talk to us a little bit about how that ended up happening. I guess if we fast forward to now you're released,
Mhm.
and I'm assuming you were looking for work, and maybe somehow, some way you landed upon working with the inside circle from your relationship. But that's just my assumption. I want to give you the floor to tell us what happened.
Certainly, certainly. So, Juneteenth, 2014, I get out. I'm released. I come home. I go back to Sacramento, and I hit the ground running. A week later, I'm working. I had some contacts that were able to connect me with a job within a week, and
Mm, mm, mm.
going to work for Inside Circle was not a thing that was on my mind. I was just looking to put my life together. I was looking to connect with family. I
Right.
was looking to get a job. I
Yep.
was looking to, implement this new lifestyle and move on about my life. Potentially start
Right.
working, with at-risk youth. That was really something that I had a passion for. And while I was inside, some folks came in who were part of Inside Circle, the McClearys. One of my mentors, Dr. James McCleary, and his sons, Miles and Jairus. They filmed the work while I was still inside, so I was in the film. And so that happened in like 2009. The film actually didn't come out until 2017. And so when it was
Mm.
getting ready to premiere in Austin at whatever that film festival is down there, there
Oh,
was a
I know you're talking about. Yep.
I can't think of it off the top of
I
my
can't think
head
of it
right
either.
now.
Yep.
Yeah. So they reached out and was like, "Hey man, this film's
South
getting
by
ready to
Southwest.
South by
South
Southwest."
by Southwest. Yeah,
South
yeah,
by
yep, yep,
Southwest. We
yep.
won the directors, award, all of that stuff down there. They were like, "Hey, man, you
Mm.
want to come down here and be a part of this process? This is a premiere." A few of us were out at that time, and so that was really my getting back connected with Inside Circle out here. And that film kind of blew up. And then there were some reach outs from that. Somebody reached out and was like, "Hey, would you write an article for the LA Times?" I was asked to write an op-ed for the LA
Mm.
Times. So I wrote that,
Oh, oh.
about life transformation and gangs and things like that, and overcoming my own stuff. And about 2 months from after that, somebody reached out and was like, "Hey, I'm a curator for this thing called TED Talks and yada yada yada. Saw your op-ed. Would you be interested?" I had no fucking clue what TED Talk was.
Ooh, let's
I
go.
had no clue. So I just said yes. I get
Right.
off the phone. I tell my wife, I'm like, "Yeah, I just talked to this lady. She want me to come do something called a TED Talk." She went ape shit crazy. She was like, "TED Talk?
Crazy. Yeah,
You don't do TED?
yeah,
You don't do TED Talk?" I was like, "Let me Google what TED Talk is." So I Googled
yeah.
it. I was like, "Oh shit,
Mm-hmm.
what did I just say yes to?" Because I had no clue how large that was.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it was actually they were asking me to go to TED Women. I was the only man
Mm.
that gave a solo talk at the 2018 TED Women Conference, and it was about toxic masculinity. That was a big thing at that time. So
Yep.
that blew up. It had, it got over 1 million hits like in a few
Let's go.
months,
Let's
and
go.
I was back connected with Inside Circle, like on a volunteer independent contractor basis. At the time, I was working for traffic control. It was union. I had
Yep.
benefits. I was getting great
Yep.
pay. I had a company truck, gas cards, all of that. I saw myself probably doing that the remainder of my life. I was at like
Yep.
30
Yep.
bucks an hour and
Yep.
running crews, all of that. And our elders got at us, our elders of Inside Circle, and there were four of us that were out here. We refer to ourselves as the fire keepers, who were all in during that time, and they were like,
Yep.
we've taken this as far as we can take it. It's time for y'all to pick up the mantle. We passing the baton to y'all to take it and run with it.
Mm. Mm.
That was always their vision. Nobody thought that any of us would get out because everybody was doing life, but they spiritually
Yep.
always had the vision that if we did get out, it would become our thing. And
I
so
love it.
in 2018, we were handed the mantle, and there were some folks. There was a lady, Lisa Blum, her and her husband Andrew Blum, who were longtime supporters of the movement. I asked her, as we, reconstituted the company, I asked her to be the executive director, because I still saw myself as, I'm gonna be doing this traffic control over here, and when I'm
Yep.
needed, as I'm
Yep.
needed to come facilitate it,
I'll
I'll
jump
come
in.
plug in. And I
Yep.
could never see myself. I'd never pictured myself as like in that position. That's for somebody
Mm-hmm.
else. And
Mm.
she got at me. She was like, you know what, this organization is, for folks that are incarcerated and formerly incarcerated. What is not needed is another, middle class white face as the front person.
Can I stop you for 1 second? Just for 1 second. And
Sure.
please say that thought. But I have to say this. Just yesterday, I went on my social medias and I made a post about how disgusted I am in the fact that the majority of these nonprofit leaders usually don't have the shared or the lived experience of the populations they serve.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of these people, most people don't know, but for our listeners listening in, you have executive directors of the Boys and Girls Club, the executive directors of the YMCA's, some of these big nonprofits, and when I say they're making 200,000, 175,000, they put their peers in positions, executive roles, and then they feel as if they're helping the community through their work. And
Mm-hmm.
then sometimes they are, and it might even come from a good space. But at the end of the day, how much more effective is it to have individuals who actually live that experience that the organization's mission is to accomplish, and bring in other individuals who have that same shared lived experience a part of their leadership teams? It'll be so much more authentic. They'll really understand the needs of the populations they serve, and they'll really be able to affect it effectively. And so I just had to share that because I love that they were thinking, we don't need us in this role. We need you in this role.
Yeah.
So, floor is back to
Yeah.
you.
So she got at me. She said, okay, I will do this because, I wanted them to do it because they got a lot of business experience. They're used to,
Mm-hmm.
her husband, runs a company that messes with Fortune 50 companies, not Fortune
Mm.
500, but Fortune 50 companies.
Ooh,
And so I
ooh,
wanted
ooh.
that sort of experience kind of at the helm and pushing this. And she said, okay, I'll do this, but I'll do this alongside you. So we created
Mm.
co-executive directorship. And so it was like her bringing the skills with the, what does bookkeeping look like? What does the management look like? What did, all of the processes that need to be in place for day-to-day operations.
Yep.
But with me on the other side, with the out front, making the connections out in the world, pushing it, face of the organization sort of thing. And so that's
Yep.
how I initially in 2018, got into the position. And it was unpaid because we weren't at that place that time. It was like I was still working traffic control. And in my free time, and while I was at work for traffic control, when I could, doing inside circle, putting stuff together, making connections, doing different things. And then we got to a place
Yep.
in 2020, and it was like, what do we need to do to make this your full-time gig so you can really push this?
Mm.
Because we've seen what it can be with you doing it voluntarily. What would it look like if this was your gig? And so we
Full
made the
time role.
commitment. It
Yep.
was like, we can probably get you funded for a salary for 2 or 3 years. We can guarantee it for 2 or 3 years, but not much beyond that. Cause you got to, at that time we had like 30 something $1,000 in the bank. And,
Mm.
so it was a commitment from the organization and a belief in, what they saw in me, but it was also a sacrifice and a belief in me and what we could be to walk away from what I had
Yep.
that was set and secure. And I was like, well, fuck it, balls in. Go in.
Balls in.
It's going
Let's
to
get it.
live
Yeah.
or it's going to die. It's on me.
And it speaks exactly to what we talked about. Once again, putting yourself in an uncomfortable position. Yeah, I could
Yeah.
stay at this job where I could see myself retiring, or I could roll the dice on myself a little bit
Yeah.
here and put myself in a position where I don't know what the future will be, but I know what I could bring to this role. I just want to also highlight something else you said, a couple of things. You also talked about mentorship. I think
Hmm.
for our brothers and sisters that are listening in who are incarcerated, and then also our listeners who just are tapping in, I always like to speak to the importance of mentorship. Almost every single episode we have, our guests talk about how they had mentors who helped shape their lives. If it's not, I mean, I always say success leaves clues. One clue is every single one of us had mentors, and we continue to have mentors that help us guide us along the path. In addition to that, for our brothers and sisters locked down, check out the TEDx that Eldra was on. I'm sure you could probably on the Devo tablets. For our people who are home, you could Google his name and tap into that. But I'm sure you'll get a lot of gainful experience from his TEDx as well as his LA Times uh, uh, op-ed. So if you could find those two articles, I definitely suggest all our listeners go back, check those out to gain some more insights to Mr. Jackson. And in addition to that, I would like to say to people, the last thing I want to say about that segment is you did it for free,
Hmm.
and I think it's a true emphasis that people need to understand in life. A lot of times you have to do things for free up front
Hmm.
to be able to show your worth and your value and what you can do. And the way the universe works, the universe is always keeping score. So I'm not going to dig into what you're doing right now, but I could almost assure, just based upon what I know about the universe, is it eventually equaled itself out. So all of the work you were doing for free at some point has started to equal itself out, and it made sense today. And I
Oh,
mean,
without.
even for myself, there's you know what I mean? And so I just encourage our peoples to understand that when you do get out, when you do come home, there's nothing wrong with laying a little foundation and doing things for free on the front end with the expectation that it will equal itself out on the back end at some point. But you're going to have to sometimes go out there on faith and give of yourself for free, and you will be rewarded for that.
Oh, there's no doubt. I go inside, in jails and prisons, not just in California, but across the country. And I just got
Mm-hmm.
back from a 2 week trip in the Netherlands, going into
Ooh.
prison there and taking this work there. And I don't give advice, but I
Mm-hmm.
share the experience and let people know, for most
Yep.
individuals getting out of the joint, especially career criminals like myself, you ain't got no experience in the
Facts.
workforce.
Facts.
Now
Facts.
I had transferable skills. There were things that
Talk
I was
about it.
doing in the
Yes, sir.
world and in the game that transfer into the business
Yep.
world. There were leadership skills, there were thinking skills, there were all sorts of skills that I had that transfer
Talk about it.
to being an executive, that transfer to the corporate environment, but without the paper hanging on the wall and without
Mm,
the initials
mm,
behind the name and without the
hmm.
credible experience in that world, there's
Yep.
going to have to be a prove it uh, uh, experience. There's going to have to be that segment
Yep.
of, well, I'm going to show you what I can do, just like in the game.
Just like
You
in the
know,
game.
you
Just
don't
like
just
in the
walk
game.
into the space and all of a sudden you got stripes and stars and bars and you a general and you leading the organization and you run it. You got to put in work. You got to earn your bones. It's the same
It's a
thing in the
fact.
corporate world. The game is the same. The only
Game
thing
is
that's
the same.
different, and I tell cats all the time, the only thing that's different is we playing by a different set of rules. But
And you
it's
just got to
all
learn the
a
rules.
game. It's all a
And
game.
once you learn the rules of the game you play in, now you can adjust to it and play the game accordingly. And so, to your point, when you talked about strategy, the time you spent in the box, getting to just think, I tell my brothers that's locked up every week, one thing you got an advantage that we don't have outside is you don't have all of the noise that we have. You
Hmm.
don't have all of the
Hmm.
things that are coming to you every single day. Use this time to strategize for your long-term success. Build out
Hmm.
that plan that you want to do. And now when you get out, all you got to focus on is execution of the plan. And
Hmm.
so no, I couldn't agree more, bro. But you have to learn the game that you're playing. Otherwise, like myself, I didn't know the game that I was playing when I got locked up. I didn't know that my what I was selling could get me a life sentence. Originally they wanted to give me a 4 to life sentence. I ended up copping
Hmm.
out to a 4 to 12, so I ended up getting a 12-year sentence. But essentially, if the 19-year-old me would have known, wow, I could get life for this, I don't think I would have did it. Even though I was an ignorant little kid doing whatever I wanted to do, I think I would have been fearful of that L on the end, that it would have made me choose some other pathways. But
Hmm.
I didn't do the homework. I was just doing what the homies was doing. It looked good.
Yeah.
It felt good. The girls loved it. I was getting money. And so I think all too many times we don't take the time to learn about the fucking game that we're in and how to
Yeah.
win the fucking game that we're in. And I think
Yeah.
we're both saying the same thing. Use this time to strategize and build out your plan so you can get in the game and you can win.
Use
So
the
now,
time to
Eldra,
strategize so you can get in the game and know the rules and win. And one thing, man, I got to add on to the back end of that, the things that you're doing inside that you find are successful in order for your
mm-hmm,
peace, in order for you to get in position so that you can get out, the things that make you whole and help you find freedom within yourself while you're in there, it's easy to get away from that and lose that when you get
facts,
out here because shit
facts,
moves so
facts.
fast. So what Trent
That's a
is
fact.
saying is important, but I would also add on to that and keep grounded in the things that you
That's
have
a fact.
found inside that work for you.
Yep,
Don't
yep.
think
I
that,
agree with
okay, all I got to do is get out and that solves the problem. No, that's just the
you.
beginning because you're just going from a smaller yard to a bigger yard.
To a
This is a
bigger
bigger
one. That's
yard
a
out
fact.
here. So
That's a
that
fact.
programming that keeps you, that makes you a success in there and keeps you grounded and keeps your foot planted, one foot in front of the other, push, pull, strive, and all of those other positives. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just because
Mm,
you done got
mm.
out, yeah, there are some things that you don't want to take from prison that are, a part of the institutionalization, but there are other things that help you become a success. Don't throw those things
Talk it.
out just because you get out of prison.
Talk about it. Talk that talk, brother, and that's a fact. He's 100% right. And then once you start winning, oftentimes you even will again fall victim to losing sight of some of the things that actually helped you become effective. I'm actually going through that right now. There were certain things that I did when I was first starting my businesses that I know helped me win. And as I was winning at a high level, I got away from them things. And so now I'm even getting back to the basics because it's like, bro, if it was working, why would you stop doing it? Like, no matter how successful you are, why would you stop doing it? And so I couldn't agree more, bro. So now, Eldra, tell us a little bit about the Inside Circle. What you do there as an executive director today, and what you guys stand for, your mission, your values, and how you help others.
So the mission, excuse me, the mission is to empower system impacted people to lead change from within. And that
Mm.
change from within is multifaceted. It's internally change as a person from within, but it's also from within inside prison. And that system impacted piece is
Uh,
also a play on words as well, because right now the paradigm is system impacted is folks that are in prison, in jail, on probation, on parole. Every human being on the face of this planet is impacted by a system. The political system, the
talk that.
financial system, the school system. In some countries, we got a caste system. So there are all sorts of
Mm,
systems that we're all a
mm,
part of.
mm.
And what we do is we work with folks to develop new relationships with trauma, to identify
Mm.
trauma, develop new relationships, and begin to be able to come from a healthy perspective, not to solve the trauma, not to cure it, but to identify it and help create new, hopefully, new ways of responding as opposed to reacting from triggers.
Right. Love
So it
that.
was in
Love
Inside Circle where I was able to go back and meet that little 7-year-old boy, 8-year-old boy, 9-year-old boy, and
that.
identify
Mhm.
where I developed the coping mechanisms that, yeah, they helped me keep from going apeshit crazy and losing my mind from the trauma, but they were defense techniques that I carried on
Mm,
through adulthood. So when certain
mm.
triggers came up, when certain things came up that triggered that 7 or 8-year-old boy, I could have been 20 years old, 30 years old, 40 years old, but I'm responding like I'm
As
7.
that said, that's a fact. That's a fact.
So we support folks in that, so as executive director, I go inside of we go inside multiple prisons here in California.
Mm,
We work in high schools. We work with at-risk youth in the community. We go into the Shelby County Jail in Memphis, Tennessee. We just wrapped up a year-long program where we were working with the Kings County District Attorney in Brooklyn, the mayor's office on
mm.
criminal justice, working with two oppositional forces in Bed-Stuy, the Hoolies and the
Oh,
900s. Now them cats are, they're working together and working with at-risk youth and trying to do something different in their projects. Uh,
mm, mm,
I just, like I was mentioning, just came back from the Netherlands. Me and Dr. McCleary, we were over there helping the volunteers that will be going into the prisons there. And then we went inside the prison with them to set up the first circle. We
fire,
do this work
fire.
with corporations. I actually go in and consult with CEOs
Yep.
and C-suite teams and do this work. We do this with people in the community. This is human work. It's a program that
Mm,
started in
yep.
prison,
Yep.
but it works with the human condition. So my job as executive director is to spread this and put us out of business. Basically, my job as executive director
I love
is
it.
to put Inside
Yeah.
Circle out of business.
Yeah.
But the work that we do and the way that we create spaces where human beings can see each other,
I love it.
and we can
Love it.
move away
I love
from
it.
the habitual energy of seeing people as the other and seeing people as the enemy, and getting to a place where I can recognize myself in you and you can see yourself
Mm.
in me, and we can see the commonality. And so
Yes, sir.
my job
Yes,
is
sir.
to make this a part of the culture. And so when we're
Mm.
talking to each other open like this, and when I'm able to say, yeah, when I went to jail, when I was doing all of that quote unquote gangster shit, I was doing it out of fear. It ain't because I was hard. When I can speak to those truths,
Yep.
then there's no need for Inside Circle, because people are speaking from a place of genuineness. People are speaking from a place of
Yep.
authenticity. People are speaking from a place of compassion, and they see in others, and I don't want to harm nobody, and nobody wants to harm me. So that's really my job as executive director of
Yep.
Inside Circle, is to make what we do more common, more normal.
More normal. Normalize it. Get away from the stigmas and the bias historically, it sounds like. And I love it, brother. I love the work you're doing. I love what you and your organization stand for. Um, I try to keep these interviews around 45 minutes. I know people have short attention spans and you know how it goes. So with that, I want to try to start to wrap this one up. But
Mhm.
before we wrap it up, one question I always ask all of our guests are,
Okay.
In this instance, I would be asking you, essentially, what would you tell maybe the 13-year-old you, or let's even say the 19-year-old you when you got that longer bid, looking back at the man you are today? What would
Hmm.
you tell that youth that you once were, um, if you could go back and say, hey, I know what the future holds for you,
Hmm.
but if you were to take this path or you go on this path, it could change your total trajectory. What would you tell that youthful you, um, now knowing the insights that you know today, to
Stop lying to
potentially
yourself.
change? Mm, mm,
Stop lying to
mm,
yourself.
mm, mm. Stop
It,
lying to
it, it'd be
yourself.
just that simple for me. Stop lying to yourself, because me lying to myself, empowers me to lie to other people.
Mm,
And once
that's
I
a
tell a
fact.
lie to myself and I tell
Mm,
that lie to other people, then I got to keep telling it, and then it can grow, and then I got to keep
that's,
feeding it.
that's a fact.
And that
How
takes a
about
lot
this?
of energy. That takes a lot of effort.
It definitely does keep that lie going. I love that answer because I would even say when we lie to ourselves, we're not really seeing what reality is. And so
Hmm.
you won't be able to ever change your situation by lying to yourself. We got to keep,
Hmm.
if there ain't nobody else on this earth you want to keep it a buck with, it's got to be yourself. Like, if you
Yeah,
can't keep it a buck with yourself, how you going to keep it a buck with anyone else? And
it's
so
not
I love
possible.
that answer, man. I agree. I agree. So, Eldra, do me a favor. Tell everyone where they could find you, your social media handles, your website. Tell us where they could find your organization, as well as just any information where they could get in touch with you.
Certainly. So, the best way to learn more about who we are and what we do is at insidecircle.org. And Inside Circle also has a Facebook page and Instagram page. I don't personally, as an individual, I don't do social media. I don't have the time for it. But the organization does. I do have a LinkedIn profile, and you said it earlier. Trent, there's a lot of information that people can find if they punch in Eldra Jackson in a search engine. All sorts of stuff will pop up. That's
Okay.
informational, that could be helpful or could lead to other stuff.
And so the listeners, if you didn't catch what the brother said, he just said he's Googleable. That means you could Google his name and you're gonna find some positive stuff. And just think about it for our listeners. We have a brother that at one point, if you would have Googled his name, it would have been nothing but negative. It would have been criminal records, it would have been car chases, it would have been incarceration. Today, if you Google this brother's name, it's nothing other than positive impact. It's all about the inside circle. It's all about helping and uplifting others. It's about changing viewpoints and perspectives. And that's something that we encourage all of our listeners that it's possible. One thing I
Yeah.
always like to tell everyone is there's greatness inside of each and every one of us. And it's up to you to extract that greatness. And it only happens by putting in the work. And like Eldra said, he would tell his younger self by keeping it real with yourself. And so I hope that, you guys enjoyed today's episode. You guys could literally be anywhere in the world, but right now you're here with us. I hope that we were able to provide you with some actionable steps, some good resources that you can start to apply into your own life. And again, take some time to look out, Google this brother because he is Googleable, and let's continue to change the narrative. And one thing for certain, I know that each and every one of you guys that are listening, you can achieve anything you want to achieve. You can be a boss. You might be experiencing incarceration. You might be going through a downtime right now, but everything in life is just small segments of time, and this too shall pass. You today heard from a brother who at one point was facing life. I'm sure he never thought he would be an executive director giving back in the way he is, but he is. And so with that being said, it is possible. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of Prison Bosses. Thank you again, Eldra, for being here.
Thank you, Trent. Thanks for having me.
Most definitely, brother. So